Knights, Castles, Action. Today I played the most strategic action RPG out there, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. My journey started when I was born into a Vlandian family. My father was a bailiff for an estate, he resolved disputes in villages, and fought as an armored knight. When I was just a young lad, I had a way with people, being a very good leader in my friend group, and I had quite the charm. As I got a bit older, I gathered herbs for the village healer, learning how to heal wounds and bring down any fever. In my teenage years, I served a minor baron of the Vlandian kingdom who taught me about stewardship and tactics. In my young adulthood, my biggest accomplishment was that I hunted down a beast, threatening a nearby village. Unfortunately, my beautiful family, consisting of my father, mother, and 3 siblings, was taken from me. We were staying at an inn, and a bunch of raiders came and attacked. My mother and father were slain by the raiders, and my 2 younger siblings were taken captive. My brother and I were only able to escape because we organized a breakout with some of the other victims staying at the same inn. My name is Inric, and this is how my journey began. I quickly regrouped with my brother Nogand after the escape. We both decided that it would be a good idea to split up and look for our siblings under our family banner. Right as I left the training grounds that we escaped to, I came across a man who was wounded under a tree. I shared what little water I had with him, and in return, he gave me this weird artifact saying it was related to Neretez's folly. I had no idea what that even was, but hey, I'll take anything for free. My family's name is Vortide, and our banner consisted of a white flag with a red bird at the center of it. Soon after getting my banner and family name established, I headed to the nearest village. On the way, I checked my skills to see all the experience that I had gained from my youth. I even had an unspent skill point that I would later use. Right when I had arrived in the village, I decided to take some time and look around. It was a pretty large village, and there weren't too many people out and about. I interacted with some of the townspeople and then hired a recruit to accompany me on my journey. We headed away from the village, and I checked our main priorities that my brother and I came up with. These included establishing our family clan to get our siblings back, and to investigate Neretez's folly. I then checked the Encyclopedia of the World, and I was able to find information on my family, and just the world of Calraida in general. As I was traveling to the first major city, I came across a group of 6 bandits that ambushed me and my 1 recruit. They told me that I would have to pay some dinars, which was the currency of the land, or they would kill me. I was not planning to pay these bandits in any way other than blood, so I rode my 1 recruit into battle. Thankfully, these bandits seemed very poor and just had farm tools and rocks. My spear and noble steed gave me quite an edge to fighting them. My recruit actually did a good job and ended up taking down one of the bandits. We then were able to hold him off for a little while longer, but unfortunately, he got injured. It was just me and 4 bandits left. I just rode around in circles and kept hitting them with my spear as they threw rocks and tried to hit me back. Thankfully, the reach of my spear was enough to keep a decent distance while also doing damage to them. It wasn't long until I finished off the last bandit, and I had gained a little bit of renown from this battle for the Vortide clan name. I took one of the looters as a prisoner, and I was able to take the looter's dinars and equipment. I even equipped the arm wraps and boots that I scavenged from the looters. After the battle, my 1 recruit and I made our way to a Northern Empire city. The city was super nice, and it had huge walls surrounding it which felt very lively. People were scattered across it, and there was even a barber. I tried to approach the prison and the Lord's Hall, but unfortunately I didn't get let into either. I then checked out the arena and saw that there was a whole leaderboard to it. From the fight, I leveled up my polearm skill and got an increase in damage when I used them while mounted. I also threw some learning points into crossbows. Finally, I checked out the market and interacted with an imperial general right outside of the city who I asked about Neretez's folly. He told me that in 1077 there was a battle called Pendraic. In the battle, an emperor named Nerites led an army with the Khazates and Asari to fight a coalition of the Sturgian, Battanians, and Vlandians. I headed to the next city and actually came across the Emperor of the Western Empire. He was able to tell me what happened at Pendraic as he was there personally. After our little talk, I went to the village of Arpotis and recruited 2 more recruits. I was able to upgrade one of my recruits to an Imperial infantryman from the fight before. I engaged some bandits, but this time the fight was a lot more fair. It was a 4v4. Not even a single one of my men was injured from the battle. After a little more traveling, I made it to the homelands of the Vlandian people, so my culture. I sold off some loot from my previous fight, recruited 3 more warriors, and bumped into Baron in Gelither. He told me about his part in the Battle of Pendraic. When I got the information that I needed, I headed to a huge city called Jacqueline. There was a tournament taking place there. The reward was a pretty expensive horse, so I made some bets that I would win the tourney, and began my first round. The structure of the first round was 4 teams of 2. 1 person got a polearms, and 1 person got a crossbow. I was given the polearms, and my partner had the crossbow. My partner and I took out the blue team's polearm trooper first. Then we started to focus on the blue team's crossbowmen. It appeared that the red and green team both only had 1 person left, so I knew that this round was going to be super easy to finish off. My teammate and I came out on top very quickly. I bet more money on myself to win the tournament, and then we started round 2. Round 2 was structured as 1s, so a 1v1v1v1. I started off as the yellow team and was going against the blue team again. This time we exchanged a couple hits, and I had a sword and a shield, so it was a little back and forth before I finally took out the blue trooper. I was now in a 1v1 scenario with my teammate from the last round. Their name was Lasand, and I'm pretty sure they were a noble. Noble or not, I destroyed them in the arena. Before we started the next round, I bet some more money on myself, and then a 2v2 commenced. It was structured kind of like the first round, just this time it was only a 2v2. I was given the polearms again, and my partner was given the crossbow. Once we finished the third round, I bet on myself again, and the final round had started. We were given horses, shields, spears, and a sword. The battle started off kind of roughly as my opponent was very aggressive and landed some decent hits on me. After I had won the tournament, I found out that my opponent, Sylvan, in the last round, was actually a Lord of Vlandia. I was pretty hyped that I defeated her. I received some renown and my horse that I sold for a solid 7.7 thousand dinars. That was a big win for me. I then bought some horse armor with my winnings, and I was able to bribe my way into the keep where I talked to another Vlandian Lord Unthuri about the Battle of Pendraic. After our previous conversation, I realized I had unlocked some learning points from the arena. I decided to put them into polearm and riding. It was my goal to visit every city in the Vlandian lands, so I headed out to the next nearest one. That was when 22 bandits ambushed my party of 7 out of nowhere. This was not going to be good. The bandits struck right when we were marching through a village. My men didn't hold for very long, and I eventually was taken out after taking quite a few bandits with me. This was very concerning because I was now their prisoner. I didn't know what they were going to do with me. Luckily, after about a day went by, I was able to bribe one of my captors to let me go with some hidden money that they didn't know I had. As soon as I was released, I headed to the same exact village where the fight took place and recruited as many soldiers as I could. I didn't want a repeat of what just happening again. I then headed to the city of Galen, bought some food, light bolts for a crossbow, and headed to another nearby village to buy more recruits. I came across another tournament at the city of Ox Hall, and I joined it, of course. The prize this time was very strong boots. This tournament was structured a bit differently, with the first 2 rounds being only a 1v1. I quickly won the first and the second rounds. The third round and fourth rounds were over very quickly as no one even stood a chance. After the tournament, I bought a new shield with my winnings. I then recruited some more troops and headed to the city of Revolt. I killed some random bandits on the way there. From the loot, I snagged a cloth head wrap, which gave me head defense. I then joined and easily won this tournament in Revolt and sold the prize sword for around 2,000 dinars. Once I had finished the tournament, I realized I had unlocked some more skill points and focus points that I put into some random skills. Since my party and I experienced the Vlandian homeland, I decided that it was time to head into the land of Britannia. I came across another lord who had been at the Battle of Pendraic, and I got all the information I could. I only had to talk to 6 more lords and figure out the mysteries of the battle in order to fully understand what happened. I then traveled to the lands of the Old Empire, which is now currently a part of the Western Empire, to join a tournament in the city of Legata. This tournament was a lot different than the Vlandian ones, and a bit harder to be frank. The first round consisted of 4 teams of 4. We were all just dropped in the center of the arena, and an all-out brawl happened. After my 3 teammates had gotten eliminated, it was just me against 3 horsemen. I grabbed a spear off the ground and mounted up a random horse only to be dismounted. I then dismounted one of the enemy horsemen and had a one-on-one duel with them. The other 2 horsemen were fighting each other and one of them had gotten eliminated, so it was now a 1v1 and this enemy had a mount and I didn't. Luckily, this guy just randomly charged me and I was able to dismount him and then win a one-on-one fight. That round was brutal. Little did I know, the second round was also going to be incredibly intense. The round started off okay as it was a 2v2, but then I accidentally wounded my teammate and had to fight off the enemies in a 2v1 situation. I was holding on for dear life as the 2 enemies were bombarding me with attacks. I finally got off one singular swing that knocked out one of the enemies and changed the tide of the round. The last 2 rounds were very simple 1v1s and I ended up winning the camel prize. I ended up buying a simple light crossbow with the money that I got from selling the camel. Per usual, I leveled up during the tournament and got to select some perks. My tournament chasing career was finally taking off as it seems like I won quite a few so far. I headed into the lands of the Northern Empire to explore and look for even more tournaments. The first city I ended up at had a tournament going on which I of course won. I then checked the tourney leaderboard for all of Calraida and I was placed 39th, which was awesome. I arrived at the next major city called Argeron. I did the tournament there and I ended up winning these striped vambraces for my armor. This was super nice as they had a great armor rating, a lot better than what I was currently wearing at least. A bunch of bandits attacked me on the way to the next city. A group of 23 and a group of 10 banded together to try and take me down. I scouted ahead and started to shoot the bandits with my crossbow, and I had my men pull back to get even more space. My crossbowmen got to work. Finally, when the bandits were split up, I told my troops to charge. The battle went really well despite being outnumbered. My troops were far superior, and I also had better tactics than the enemies. I got a lot of loot from the bandits, and I also recruited a new companion into my party from the next city's tavern. He was kind of just hanging out there, and had a lot of good traits, so I decided to bring him along and gear him up with some of the bandits' loot that we had just gotten. I then sold any remaining items. My party had just entered the Kassate lands. The first city we came across, Makeb, had a tournament going on in it. I must have been following the tournament master or something because every single city I've gone to had an arena going on. Just starting off on the first round, this tournament seemed a lot different as the primary weapons that we were given weren't ones that I was accustomed to. I got a bow, a sword, and sometimes javelins. It appeared that the rounds of these tournaments were taking a lot longer than what I was used to as well. I honestly thought they were kind of harder. Despite the tournament feeling harder, I ended up coming out on top. Of course, I sold the reward. After the tournament, I killed some rogue bandits on the way to the next city, and then I won the tournament in that city, getting a 17,000 dinar horse, which obviously I sold. I had finally come across a city that didn't have a tournament going on in it, which was kind of nice for a change. There wasn't really much going on in the Kassate lands, so I ended up heading into the Asari lands. In a random castle I came across, there was a lord who was captured in the dungeon, and I couldn't talk to them to get information on the Battle of Pendraic. This was kind of annoying because it was definitely going to halt my progression in the campaign. But luckily, a random lord patrolling nearby had some information on the battle. I had now talked to 5 out of 10 lords that had information on the battle. I passed a few more cities and had joined my very first Asari tournament. It really wasn't anything special, but I did win some very good shoulder guards from it. As I made my way along the shores of the Asari coast, I recruited some horsemen and took on some random bandit fights. Soon enough, I arrived at the Asari Western Empire border. I came across yet another tournament which I was super sick of at this point. I was doing so many of them. There was really good leather armor as the reward though, so I had to partake in this tournament as I wanted to use this leather armor. Every time that I got a new piece of equipment, it also meant that my companion was going to get some new equipment. I ended up seeing another tournament in the next city. I checked the reward only to see that it wasn't anything good. So I immediately forfeited the tournament because I didn't want to use any of my precious time fighting for a reward that really wasn't worth it. It was about time that I headed back to the Vlandian lands, so I started to make my journey back to the city of Sargad. When I arrived, I talked with Fredcart the oil presser, and I set up a caravan from the city. I had to pay 22,000 dinars to set up a caravan and get extra good guards to protect it. My companion, Samandrai the Grizzled, was in charge of leading this caravan. He would no longer be in my party, but be a part of my first royal caravan in my clan. This, in theory, should start providing a lot of dinars per day, which should cover the salary of my troops. I saw the caravan launch for the very first time, and he was off. It was time to start beefing up my army, as the caravan that just launched had 30 members, and my party only had 15. I recruited as many men in the city that I could, and I had an army size of 27 now. This was a pretty significant increase, and my clan was now established. An established clan meant that it had 20 members, over 2,000 dinars, 1 companion, and a clan level of 2. Feeling emboldened by my new clan strength, I saw a bandit camp and decided to raid it. We had to wait until nightfall to attack. While waiting though, I saw a random army marching through the lands, and as I awaited nightfall, I decided that it would be a good idea to go and talk to the army's nobles. One of them informed me that one of their relatives was captured by a local gang in the nearby city of Charas. He would pay me to go free them. I graciously accepted this offer and added it to my to-do list. I realized that the time that I spent traveling and talking to this army, I had missed my chance to strike the bandit camp. So I headed back towards the bandit camp, and on the way encountered some more bandits. This was my first battle having more than 20 members on each side of it, so I was given a command screen before the battle launched. Here I was able to plan out heroes and leaders for each part of my army. I set up my troops in a defensive format, and the enemies rushed us. I went and dispersed the enemy lines a bit, and told my army to engage while the enemies were split apart. We won the battle with only 2 casualties. I finally was at the hideout during nighttime, and I started to attack it with some of my most loyal troops. All was going well, and I was taking out most of the enemies with my crossbow. That was until I told my troops to charge, and they left me with 4 or so enemies that I could barely just kill. The bandit leader came out, and I was in no condition to fight, so I had gotten injured and almost died, but thankfully some of my extra troops dragged me out of the bandit hideout just in time. My party headed back to Sargad to heal up and rest. While we were there, Radagos, the one bandit who was a part of the raid on the inn that killed my parents, approached me. He told me that his partner betrayed him and gave me the location of where my siblings were being held. He vowed to help me get them back as long as I allowed him to kill his ex-partner in crime. I agreed to the deal and bought a better helmet for the bandit hideout raid as the last one didn't go very well. In the meantime, I upgraded some of my troops and headed to Charas to try and free the royal relative that was from that one quest. I was very injured from that last bandit camp, so I didn't want to really get into any combat. Once I talked to the gang leader, I ended up paying to release a noble relative instead of having to fight them. I also did the tournament in the city as I needed some extra dinars. When the tournament finished, I picked some perks for my skill tree and added some learning points to the crossbow, polearm, steward, and scouting skills. I then headed directly to the bandit hideout. Radagos and I planned our attack at nightfall, and we got to work. The camp wasn't very heavily fortified, and I was able to eliminate a lot of the bandit guards with my crossbow. When all the guards were clear, I made light work of Gelter, the bandit that killed my parents. Radagos then executed him and got his revenge. My brother took our siblings to Sargat while I dealt with Radagos. He was the reason that my parents died, so I decided that he needed to pay for it. After everything was handled, I picked up Nogan from Sargat, and he joined my party. My sibling Alda turned 14, and I decided to gift her a trip to the Realm's Court to increase her stewardship skill. She also took an interest in the art of healing. I then instructed my brother, on the other hand, to develop a sharp mind. He then asked me which skill I think is most important. I said stewardship, which he decided to study. I decided to check out the skill tree for a couple of my troops just to see what they could become. I then equipped Nogan with a bunch of different equipment that I had gotten from killing bandits, as I wanted to make sure he was geared up in case he would ever lead a party for my clan. I also entered the tournament in Sargat, which I won, and I was able to sell the loot from the bandits and the reward from the tournament to make some money. From the Sargat market, I ended up buying some extra horses so that way I could carry a lot more loot in the future. I cleared a bunch of bandit hideouts on the way to Britannia, and I met up with a random alderman of a village who sold me a bunch of grain and said that I could mark up and sell for at another city. I told my brother Nogan to go do this quest, and I provided some of my troops to him to get it done. As Nogan went to go sell the grain, I pursued finding nobles to continue my investigation on Nair Teresa's folly. I first came across a Britannian noble named Bethag, and she told me that I could talk to Keldog, the current High King of the Britannian people, who had happened to be at the Battle of Pendraic and would know all about it. I asked her where I could find the High King, and she directed me towards a nearby city. As I was heading there, I ran into a couple of nobles who had information on the Battle of Pendraic. I had to have gotten so lucky because there was a total of 3 nobles in this party that were at the battle. Once I got their perspectives on the battle, I checked and I only needed 2 more noble stories to get all the information that I needed. It also appeared that Nogan should complete the quest I sent him to do in 4 more days. I continued my search for Keldog, and he ended up not being at the city that he was apparently last seen at, but he was at one nearby. I just needed to talk to one more noble now who knew about the battle, but I had no idea where to start. It seemed like randomly roaming around has worked out pretty well so far, so I continued to do that in hopes to find the next noble. While I was roaming, Nogan had finished his quest, and he was set to return to my party with the troops and dinars that he made. Roaming around was not working. It honestly started to waste some of my days. So I ended up talking to a random noble I found on the map, and they told me that the only person that they would know who knows about that battle and I haven't talked to already is in the lands of the Khazades. That just happens to be halfway across Calraida from me. This was very unfortunate that I had to return to the same lands where I was just at not too long ago. At least this time when I was traveling, I knew who I was looking for. A Khan named Manchug. This was incredibly lucky but convenient, but I ran into Manchug the second I entered the Khuzade lands. I did it. I finished talking to all the lords and ladies that I needed to. I was now directed to talk to 2 more people, unfortunately, but apparently they were professionals on the topic. I checked out my skills, and I saw that my scouting ability had leveled up, so I was able to invest a perk that would allow me to have plus 10% vision range on the campaign map. This was really useful. There was a tournament going on nearby, and I figured since I'm in the area, I might as well stop by and win it. As usual, I sold the loot right when I got it, and started to head back towards the Botanian lands, where I needed to continue my investigation on Neretez's folly, of course with tournaments on the way. It seemed like there were always tournaments going on in the Northern Empire. You would think that's not something to complain about, as it is a good source of money, but to be honest, they do get very repetitive. Right before I entered the Northern Empire city that had one of the wise people I was looking for, I paid for a few more troops. I arrived there and talked to this lady named Istiana. She said that I had one piece of the Dragon Banner, which was a banner wielded by Calraidios the Great, a man who came to the lands of Calraidia and basically founded civilization there. Apparently a legend says that any true son or daughter of his bringing the banner into battle will never lose. Istiana gave me the location of another piece of the Dragon Banner only if I swore to use it to recreate the Empire. I wasn't sure if this was my intention, but I told her it was just to get the location of the banner piece. She gave me the location of the banner piece, which happened to be at a bandit hideout. Before heading off there, I did the tournament in the city. The prize happened to be leather armor that I already had, but Nogan didn't have it, and it was a lot better than what he was wearing, so I equipped it on him. I headed out to the bandit hideout location. I arrived right at nighttime, so I was able to go and attack it right away. I also loaded in first person, and I had no idea that you could even play this game in first person, so I was spamming buttons to see how I could get out of it, but it is a really cool feature that I didn't even know existed. When I was collecting my loot from the hideout, I grabbed the banner piece. I decided to check my skill board, and I saw that I had 40 unassigned perk points. This didn't seem right. When I inspected closer, I saw that it was actually for Nogan. I had never assigned any of his perk points. This was going to take a while. I arrived at the next city where I needed to meet up with someone who knew a lot about the Dragon Banner. I saw that there was an arena, and I had to check what the prize was. It happened to be a full helm overlaced Koyef, which is an incredibly good helmet. I knew that I had to do this arena in order to get that helmet. On the third round, I almost lost. I was taking a bunch of hard hits from this enemy, and I wasn't blocking any of them. Finally, I was able to turn the tides, and I started to get off a couple of hits, and sooner or later, I was just constantly spamming him with hits until he went down. I ended up winning the tournament and got the helmet. I was super relieved because I thought I was maybe going to lose it, but it definitely is a very good helmet, and it actually looks very cool. Nogan was also quite happy because he got a new helmet as well. I talked to Arzagos, and he gave me the same rundown that the other lady did. The only difference is he didn't want me to rebuild the Empire with the Dragon Banner, but destroy it. Before I knew it, I was heading out to the next bandit hideout after convincing him that I would use the banner to destroy the Empire. Sure enough, after looting the bandit hideout, I found the third banner piece. I now had all three pieces and could assemble the Dragon Banner. Now that looks pretty dope. I could now bring the Dragon Banner into battle against my foes. It actually increased the damage that my troops did against mounted enemies. Once the banner was built, I returned to Arzagos to figure out how to create a non-imperial kingdom. It was pretty straightforward. I had to get to clan tier 4, gather 100 troops, be an independent clan from any kingdom, and own a non-imperial settlement. I also returned to Istiana, and she told me how I could create an imperial kingdom. It really wasn't any different than creating a non-imperial kingdom, just I had to own a settlement where the culture was imperial there. I did a couple tournaments, and then I made a big decision, one that was going to completely change the game. I found a random Vlandian lord and asked him if I could enlist in the service of King Durthert. I was able to enlist as a mercenary, and I got paid each time I fought in battles that helped out the kingdom. It just so happened that the Vlandian people were at war with the Botanian people, and there was even a battle going on nearby. I joined that battle and helped out the other Vlandian nobles. We already outnumbered the Botanians, and I knew this was going to be an easy victory, but it also meant that I was going to get a lot of loot for free. There was an insane amount of people on the battlefield, and it was pretty cool to see how many troops we had ready to go. The enemy sent out one of their cavalry units alone to come scout us out. I thought this was kind of strange because we could easily kill that unit. We chased that scout back into the blob of Bannerlord soldiers. I started to just shoot my crossbow randomly at them, and I was getting hits because they were so clumped up. I was able to sneak behind enemy lines with some other horseback units. I started shooting bolts at the enemy's backs, while the rest of the Vlandian army started to engage them from the front. Once the two lines met, I pulled out my spear and started to charge into the enemy's back. The battle went exactly according to plan, and we completely slaughtered the enemy. I was also able to take one of the Bannerlord noblemen as a prisoner from that battle. I got a decent amount of loot and was very satisfied. I don't think that I could have joined the Vlandian kingdom at a better time. There were so many troops just ransacking the Bannerlord villages that it seemed like we were winning the war. A party of 29 wasn't going to be enough to take on an entire village. So I went to some Vlandian towns and recruited some troops. My party was also riding super slow because we had so much loot from that previous battle against the Bannerlord forces. So I did what any normal person would do and sold a lot of it. I approached the village of Drumore with my party of 43 and we started to raid it. Of course, the villagers started to fight back. It was strange. They started to engage on my party like they were raiding us. Unfortunately for them, that wasn't the case, and we clearly outnumbered them. Right when the battle lines collided, the villagers started to take heavy casualties, and the battle was basically over. I honestly kind of felt bad, but I thought that they were going to have a lot of loot, and it turns out they really didn't. I continued pillaging the village to see if there was anything that I missed. I honestly didn't get that much loot, and I could have gotten more if I just had fought a regular battle with a noble. At that moment, I decided that I was going to go sell my loot and never raid another village. I would, however, only start fights with other nobles. When I finished selling my loot, I joined the tournament in the city of Ox Hall. I ended up making half the amount of money that I made from pillaging the village, and this was just from a tournament. That's another reason why I honestly didn't think raiding villages was worth it. Not too long after, I noticed a group of 67 Bannerlords marching into the Vlandian kingdom. So I went to a nearby village, recruited as many troops as I could, and set up an ambush. The Bannerlord noble actually ended up approaching me, and he acted like he was going to take me down. I think this is because he had more troops and felt cocky. I set up my troops how I normally do, infantrymen in the front, archers in the back, and cavalry on the side. As usual, I rode up ahead. I wanted to engage the enemies and take out some of their horsemen before they actually engaged with my troops. Whew, that was risky. The enemies could probably tell what I was doing, and they sent horsemen after horsemen to try and stop me. After taking out a few more enemies, the battle lines were about to meet. I told all my troops to charge and hoped for the best. The horsemen got right to work and were actually taking out quite a few enemies. I saw a lot of green in the kill log at the beginning of the battle, which was very good. I rushed over to the enemy backline of archers and was able to take 2 kills before heading back towards the front lines. Things honestly weren't looking the best, and it looked like the enemy infantrymen killed a lot of mine. I only had archers and horsemen left. It did say that the tides of the battle, however, were equal, so I was a little bit confused, but maybe my horsemen were going to pull through. I was wrong. It wasn't the horsemen, it was the crossbowmen. They started just unloading bolts on the enemies that were so close to them I thought they would start using their sword, and just started to melt them. The few enemies that remained fled the battle. We had won. Against all odds, we had won. I honestly don't even know why I decided to fight a battle that I was outnumbered by 24, but I was glad that I did. Strangely enough, I had to fight the 2 people that fled. We'll just say I hunted down the 2 runners, and I had to take them out. Well, that didn't take long. I now had another noble prisoner of the Bannerlord kingdom. It was also pretty nice because the enemies that I had just fought had a few prisoners with them. I was able to recruit them into my own party and take on some more troops. This was the moment I was waiting for. I grabbed all my valuable loot. I then made my way to Ox Hall once again, and I was overweight, so it was taking quite a while to travel. I got distracted on the way, and put some of the loot that I got on Nogan because it was better than some of his equipment. I also checked out my skills and chose some perk points for riding and crossbow that make my crossbow accuracy improved. I finally made it to the city and started to sell off all the loot that I had. It was time to upgrade some of my gear. I bought some expensive armor and expensive gloves. I also traded in my horse, which was worth around 19,000, so I only paid around 10k dinars for these 2 armor pieces. I upgraded some of my troops, as I assumed that I was going to be fighting a lot more battles. I then ransomed off some of my prisoners at the local tavern. I was pretty surprised because I got a lot more dinars than expected. Unfortunately, the war came to an end. The Vlandian and Battanian people made peace. This was very unfortunate for me because I wanted to take on a lot more big battles. However, for the Vlandian kingdom, this was a good thing. The Battanian kingdom had to pay the Vlandian kingdom a certain amount of money per day, and that was to keep peace. So they basically were getting free money. Well, it was time to get back to doing tournaments. I needed a steady source of income, and tournaments was a good one. I checked the tournament leaderboards, and I was 5th in all of Calraida. My goal was to get to the very top. I traveled from city to city, and I only did the tournaments that had really good rewards, so that way I wasn't wasting time, and I was actually making a profit while also benefiting my armor. As usual, Nogan's gear benefited from this as well. At a random Imperial city, I bumped into someone named Cietra the Ill-Starred. She had a lot of really good traits and was looking to be a companion, so I took her into my party. The tournament went well. I honestly don't think that I lost a single tournament that I've entered and actually played out. My party traveled to a few more cities where I picked up another companion and then did another tournament. I then did even another tournament, but the reward of this one caught my eye. It was the same helmet that I was wearing. Nogan is gonna be happy. I also started to get gear for my other 2 companions, as they were gonna be in charge of leading caravans. Out of nowhere, a random courier arrived bringing a message from Garios, the Emperor of the Western Empire. He told me that he wanted me to pledge allegiance to him as a vassal because of my growing reputation. I was very honored, but I was just going to go ahead and ignore this courier. I was finally sitting on a decent amount of money, so I went to Ingalathur the oil presser, and I asked if I could buy their oil press. He very gratefully allowed me, and I had a new oil press. I also won the tournament that was going on in the city. That was it. That was the tournament that brought me to the top of the tourney leaderboards. I was now ranked number 1 in all of Calraida. I never really looked at the clan interface for hosting parties, so I checked it out, and it appears that you could assign different people in your party different roles. This was pretty cool. I also saw my workshop on the Others tab of my clan interface. I was able to change the production of what the workshop was producing. I did some more tournaments and sold some loot, so I was able to afford a caravan to the city of Ox Hall. Even though I was basically broke on dinars, I was however making a lot per day. I made 500 in a single day. Keep in mind, this is all passively too. I attacked a bandit hideout, assigned some perks, and bought a snazzy cape. That was when the Vlandian people declared war on the Aserai. This was amazing news. I immediately stumbled upon an enemy caravan, and I chased them down. And when I say I chased them down, I mean it. I chased them down for almost 3 days. It wasn't until they trapped themselves on a peninsula that I was able to attack. I plan on employing the same strategy that I always use and taking out some of the enemies before they make it to my front line. So, that is exactly what I did. I got to work taking out some of the enemy horsemen, and I looked cool while doing it. The new cape added a whole new aesthetic. Things were going as planned, and the enemy numbers started to decrease steadily. Half of the enemy troops decided to try and engage my troops. This didn't really make any sense, but we mowed them down. I was a little bit confused why they did this, but I told the rest of my troops to charge, and we basically had to take out a last stand. My party won the battle with minimum casualties, and we got a crap ton of loot. I made my way over to the nearest city, where I sold all of that loot for 6,655 dinars. This was definitely a dub. I noticed a big Vlandian army going into the Aserai lands, and I followed them to check it out. They were doing a castle siege. I joined in and started to help prepare the siege equipment.